Hello, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. Lithuania is urging citizens to prepare bomb shelters as tensions continue with Russia, following recent aerial incursions over Vilnius, as well as other areas and cities in Europe. And joining us now is Reuben F. from the Pulaski Foundation to discuss what these threats mean for Europe's eastern flank, civil defense, and regional security. Good to have you back in the studio, Reuben. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so I want to wind back to the weekend. We've had these contraband balloons that drifted over from Belarus into Lithuania. I mean, that's one of many things that's been happening recently. But I'm also thinking Lithuania specifically. I mean, there's a no-fly zone. So what's your assessment? What happened there? How vulnerable are we?
Well, we don't train our fighter pilots to act against these kinds of targets, balloons specifically. In this case, we train them to fly air policing patrols, and they're supposed to be able to identify any foreign objects which come in, which are deemed hazardous. But this is more of this gray zone type of activity. We keep talking about this, that the Russians are active in the gray zone. They're active in what we call hybrid warfare, and it's intensifying. But we don't seem to have formulated a response yet.
Formulating a response, I mean, there are many meetings at the moment, European officials on the highest level, also including NATO officials, etc., the United States. What does a proper response here look like for you? What's missing?
Well, it has to be something other than a sternly written letter, because that's usually what comes out of these things, which has zero effect on people like the Russians. But there needs to be some fairly stringent response. I mean, particularly if this stuff is coming out of Belarus, well, why is that? Well, Lukashenko feels like he's got some room for maneuver now because he's engaged with the United States. The U.S. has decided to give him his old job back of being the man in the middle, the guy who carries love notes between Washington and Moscow. And so he feels like he can get away with this, and that something has to be done on that score that convinces Belarus that this is not the time to start playing games.
But at the same time, I mean, there has been also progress. I mean, we're looking at in terms of those prisoners that have been released. So, I mean, it gets a tough sort of direction if we're going to be, is it more carrot and stick? So, I mean, this is a tough one to answer, isn't it?
Well, this is a case, a clear-cut, it's not our topic, it's the clear-cut case of how things in Europe, when people don't take action when they should, it gets very, very, very more expensive. So, Sergei Tikhanovsky, who was interviewed during the Warsaw Security Forum, he pointed out that he says, okay, we just spent $300 million this last weekend in elections in Moldova to keep the Russians from stealing it. Poland spent $500 million on a border wall with Belarus. It's going to cost European countries collectively about $1 trillion over the next 4 years. Because they're rearming. Back in 2020, when he was wobbly, you could have removed Lukashenko for $50 million.
Right.
And none of this would be happening. And this is the kind of thing, no one has this kind of perspective anymore, so they don't want to take action when when you can nip things in the bud.
Well, hindsight is one thing, but now we're looking also at our current reality and forward. I mean, Belarus still is part of the issue here. Also, I mean, looking at some of those threats, I mean, these were contraband balloons, but we've had these air incursions elsewhere. We've had those drones in Munich also in the last few days. We've had those things happening in Denmark last week as well. But ultimately, it's about being prepared. And I'm just wondering, specifically, if we're looking at Lithuania and also Poland, I believe there's a recent report in Lithuania that there's only about 54% of, let's say, shelters for civilians. So looking at what Lithuania is doing, calling on more modernizing bomb shelters, what's your take here? And what kind of signals that send, and how prepared is a country like Lithuania, the Baltics, or even Poland to, let's say, prepare for the worst?
Nobody's prepared, okay? I had this conversation this weekend with a friend of mine from Ukraine, and he said, if Poland had been subject to the kind of attacks that Ukraine has suffered over the last year, Poland wouldn't exist anymore. This place would just be a prairie because, and of course the Ukrainians have kind of a built-in advantage in that in Soviet times they always had bomb shelters. I mean, the building I lived in Kiev had a bomb shelter. But those work okay for protecting people if it's drones, if it's these big Shahed, things flying across. But when a ballistic missile hits a building, there were a bunch of people in a building in Kiev, and they were sheltering in a shelter beneath a building. But a ballistic missile came down on the top, and it killed everybody because those things go all the way down. So what are we talking about? We're firing ballistic missiles into a civilian population, not on a military target? Who was the last person that did that? Saddam Hussein? Before that, Adolf Hitler? I mean, this is the Russian regime, what they're up to, and we're not prepared for that. Nobody is.
We're not prepared. At the same time, we must get prepared. I mean, I can imagine it takes some time, especially if you're talking about these ballistic missiles, the payload, the power of these, the impact is much stronger. What needs to happen right now for not just Poland, but also for Lithuania, for Europe collectively, really to prepare for this? I mean, it's going to be different, isn't it? Preparing here on the eastern flank rather than in Spain or Portugal, but nevertheless, what needs to be done? How long do these sort of things take? And I mean, where's the money going to come from?
Well, the money is one thing, but I disagree with the strategy of, well, let's build more shelters to be less. Yeah, of course we need more shelters, but as someone said at the forum this past weekend, they said, you know, we need to stop trying to shoot down the arrows. We need to kill the archers. You know, these launch sites or we need better air defense, more air defense. People have been screaming about that for 3 years now, and we don't make enough stuff fast enough.
So the common problem again about capacity, about industrial infrastructure, about not having enough air defense. With that, I kind of want to loop into shooting down the arches, as you put it, the drone wall. I mean, this is an issue that's come up again recently. We've talked about it for some time. It seems the Germans are not so convinced. Pistorius, I think, last week said, well, that's not entirely what he sees as adequate. So where do you stand with that? I mean, can we make such a thing? Again, expenses, logistics?
I don't know what a drone wall is. That's no one's ever really defined that. And I don't think that's an answer. And I don't think it's necessarily affordable. If you're going to, drones have a real effect if they're targeted in a specific way that is designed to have a specific after effect or a specific impact. Sorry. It's like the Ukrainians. They're hitting Russia's oil industry. And this last weekend, one of the energy analysts in Berlin said, we have reached a point where the Ukrainians can now make more drones and hit more targets in Russia's oil industry faster than the Russians can repair the damage. That's the kind of thing you want to do with a drone, because you're impacting on military infrastructure.
It sounds almost very much, some would look at that and say it's very offensive sounding, you know, quite literally and also in capability-wise. So are you saying that Europe needs to think more offense than defense here?
You can't be on defense in this game. It's just you'll never, as one of my colleagues said once, you know, you can't keep batting back. Whether it's propaganda lies, whether it's drones, whatever, you can't. You've got to be on offense. You've got to promote your own strengths.
But at the same time, that might concern some citizens, and this is in certain electorates, maybe also in this part of the world, but also across Europe. I mean, convincing people to continue to be ready, that's a tough ask, right, for a democracy. So I'm just wondering, I mean, on the one side, we have politicians who are saying, like, pointing the finger at Russia, we have to be more prepared. But there's a civilian population, right, that in many cases, depending on where you ask, is not aware of the issue, doesn't really want to escalate things in terms of preparedness. So how do we get a civilian population in the mindset in such a diverse democracy as Europe is to that point where they understand this is a threat and they have to be prepared?
Well, the easy answer is, other than just a public education campaign, the easy answer is, this is the world we live in, people. Come on, you know, this is, we had a war in Europe how many decades ago? If we don't want it to come again, then we've got to take action now. Otherwise, the consequences will be horrendous.
What's your view on conscription? Because I mean, that was something that was being phased out very much in Europe. It's slowly in certain countries remained or coming back. But again, it's similar candidates again. It's the Nordics, it's the Baltic states, it's the eastern flank again. So what's your view on that? How does that impact mindset in the population?
We got 3 Europes. If you draw like a half moon from the Nordics down through to Poland, you have that Europe which recognizes what Russia's really about, and they've got history with Russia, and they're prepared to go all the way. They're prepared to talk about conscription. Places like Sweden, you know, have immense civil preparedness on the civilian side. Then you have the Southern Europeans who think they can make their one-on-one deals with Putin and they'll be fine. You know, the Berlusconi types and so on, and the Orbans. And then you have the Western European countries who, up until the Ukraine war, had this attitude of, well, if we pretend Putin's not a threat, he won't be. We'll just pretend he's not really a bad person. You can see very clearly those divisions still remain. And the only thing that's going to change that is, as I'm afraid, is more people dying. I don't know what else will change people's minds.
But also, let's try to be somewhat, let's call it realistic and optimistic for the future. Your takeaway now in terms of not just these bomb shelters or bomb threats or defense, what in your mind does Europe now need moving forward in the next few months? What realistically can it do?
In the next few months, they have to talk very seriously about forward planning on defense procurement. Europeans have been going out of the business of defending themselves for decades now, and so you've got to start thinking about building enough military hardware to be able to survive what's coming, and that's got to be very clear. And I'm afraid for the Russians, too bad, but that $200–300 billion you've got in frozen assets, that's going to have to be seized and utilized for some of those purposes now.
Yeah. So it seems like on multiple fronts, on the high-level politics, as well as the civilians, we all need to do more. I think that's the main takeaway here, but not enough people understand that quite yet. So we're going to have this conversation, I think, with a few more people in the next few weeks and months ahead. Look, we'll close it there. Reuben F. Johnson, really always a pleasure. Thanks for coming by.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. That concludes World Talks, but stay tuned right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.